Hi, I wanted to welcome you to our caregiving tips talk today with Aging Advantage. We're a nonprofit here in the St. Louis area that we have some funding through the St. Louis Area Agency on Aging to do these talks to help caregivers, and also we kind of help in the community helping the elderly figure out how they can stay healthy in their home or wherever they need to be and hook them up with a lot of different benefits and programs. So the one thing we're going to talk today about is just the importance of caregivers and their well-being. Um, we're going to look at several different topics with that. Self-care, the getting support, your organization, your schedules, education, stress management, all those kind of things kind of come together when you're trying to be the caregiver. It seems like it's really a full-time job for a lot of people. And a big part about it is just prioritizing self-care because we're just really taking care of the other people and we forget about ourselves. And I think, Lee, you might have a tip or two about self-care, but you were using that word a lot longer than I have been using it, I think. And Lee's one of our care managers, and she's also a chaplain and really watches how people are having do need to stop and take care of themselves. Um, do you have anything with that? Or
Well, just to say that self-care looks different for everybody. So what works for one person may not work for the other. So if you find self-care in reading, that's great. Or if you find self-care in taking a walk, or some people go get massages, some people work on cars, whatever you need to do. I mean, it's a time to just relax and rejuvenate your and like everybody has like an energy pool of how much they can give. And so how do you restore that? How do you rejuvenate? How do you just take that time for yourself? And when
yeah,
we're so overwhelmed taking care of other people, it can be hard to take that 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes to refill our battery, so to speak, recharge.
and that is a big point that is different for different people. I know you and I have different ways that we do that, and that's kind of different people's personalities, I think, play different in how they do that. But it's so important, and it's so important to set those boundaries on when to prevent you from burning out. Because when we're the caregiver, we're you know, just trying to take care of that person, and just don't take that time. Whether it could be exercise, it could be a hobby. It's also just relaxation techniques. And so that's important. And just seeking other people's support. I mean, I think we when we're trying to take care of someone else, we just get in that routine and we feel like we're the only person that can do it. And I think one of the biggest things is utilizing the other network. A lot of times people are offering you, they're saying, oh, is there anything I can do? I'm happy to help you. Give me a call if you need anything. When something happens to you in life, people will say, oh, is there anything I can do for you? And we don't end up reaching back out to them with something specific that we need. So looking at those family and friends and different support groups and really being specific and telling them I could really use this extra help with this specific thing. And also the different professionals and the professional resources in the area, whether it's therapists, counselors, and or just respite care services. That's a big thing that with us for Aging Advantage, we have these different programs that are able to help the family caregivers either with education, or we can also help with care management and just help you figure it out. Because all the care managers here have a lot of experience with it. And so we already know the resources and we know where to reach out. Where if you're in the midst of trying to take care of a situation, then and you don't know the resources, you might spend 6 hours, 10 hours just trying to figure it out, where we might just have to do one little phone call. And so that is a big burden off of your shoulders to reach out to appropriate networks that can help you. Because there's just a lot of benefits in that sharing and getting that advice from your support groups and those professionals. So I think the other thing is just being able to stay organized and creating a schedule, and when you're going to be doing things and when you're going to do your self-care, and trying to schedule in when you're doing your self-care, who who else could step in during that time to help that person, and just using the checklists and the planners, and staying on top of medical appointments. And I know a big thing with that's medications. It gets very confusing. Take this medication at this time, and then in the AM, and 2 hours before you eat, or take this one 1 hour after you eat, and do this with this one and this with this one. It gets really hard. And then especially when you're going to the doctor and then the medicines change and you're just trying to just keep up with all of it. So having it kind of written out and having a very specific system to stay on top of that, and just those planners. I don't know. Do you have anything else about that, Lee, that you're thinking of, either of those two things?
Well, I know this staying organized is key because, again, it's so overwhelming. Like that happened to me. I had a patient who they switched the prescription around. The the patient was taking medicated, like prescribed. I believe they were taking CBD oil gummies, and then the doctor needed to switch it and switched it to THC, but she didn't write the prescription out very well. And so he ended up like doubling the dose. That was not a very fun day. The patient was literally in the hospital thinking they were dying, and the nurses and I were like, no, nope, you're just a little high, and they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what. So, you know, my role in the hospital is different than my role with aging. So I, as the chaplain, kind of did some spiritual care and offered support in that way.
Right. It
But
is really hard at the hospitals. Many times you get discharged. The way that those computer systems are, it pulls all kinds of medicines from your past a lot of times. And I've been in the hospital, and all of a sudden you're getting discharged and it says like continue this medicine or stop this medicine, and you're like, I wasn't ever on that medicine, or that was something from 10 years ago. And so if you're not really up on realizing and watching, and when you're getting discharged, you're not feeling the best anyways yet. And so having somebody watching that is really important. It gets really confusing, I think. So
well,
yeah, having some type of notebook or something.
yeah. Well, and then not only just that, but to go back to what you said earlier about how we, as people who are friends of the caregivers, can help. And that is something we do so easily, right? Especially like times of really stressful situations. We just say, oh, just let me know if there's anything I can do. Well, sometimes it's easier just to say, hey, I'm going to bring you some casseroles. When would be a good time to drop it off? Or what kind of casserole would you prefer? Do you want chicken and rice, or do you want some lasagna? Like
Yeah.
it's
But
easier sometimes to just insert yourself in a loving way, not like in an overbearing way, but just to say, hey, I'm gonna do this nice thing for you. When would you like me to do it?
yeah, I think what happens too is people people do offer that help, but they don't know what help you do need. So it's more of a generic help. And so we have a special guest just in case if anybody's watching, because it's an important thing on self-care and management. But all of a sudden when you're having your child when you weren't supposed to, so and you have a presentation. So we just have a little helper in there, since Lee has to be a caregiver today. It wasn't planned, but that's what we're talking about. Things when you're a caregiver, whether it's elderly or, a little one, things happen arbitrarily and you just have to flow with them sometimes. And I forget what I was saying about that other. Um,
You were
it
talking
just,
about helping the caregiver because my
oh
point
yeah,
was
yeah, because you throw that out there, but they don't know what help they need either at that moment. And then you never really, a lot of people don't reapproach it. They're just like kind of waiting. They just throw it out there. I'll help you with anything, but they don't know what you need or but people are willing to you know, do things. And yeah, I think I had an injury last year and it was pretty bad and someone just arbitrarily called and they were like, "Oh, do you need anything? Is there something I can do?" And I said, "Oh, maybe you can come by and open my cat food." Like that was the thing. I couldn't open the food for the cat and they ended up doing some other things actually, but it was a really good, it was a really good point that it was a very simple thing and the cat couldn't eat because I couldn't get it open and so they came by. But another important tip is just educating yourself as a caregiver, educating and understanding that person's medical conditions and really what's happening with them, and just learning caregiving skills and techniques and attending different maybe workshops and training sessions. And it's hard. You're just like, oh, well, I'm caregiving. How am I going to do those training sessions? Well, there's a lot of things that are just online. Like right now, we have 2 years worth of these Facebook Lives, 2 or 3 years worth of them. Um, because we were starting these classes really during the pandemic, just before the pandemic. And then when that happened, there wasn't really places to go. So we started, live streaming them and we've continued to do that so that people can watch them later, that people just not in this area can watch them. And I know it's super important to just have those resources and education. A good one is, and I know you sometimes have some good tips with this, Lee, as well, but with Alzheimer's and dementia care, and people aren't, doing so well with some of it, and our tendency is sometimes to argue with them, like if they're saying something and you're like, well, but it's not Tuesday, it's Wednesday, or whatever the case may be, we try to make that point, and that point's not always the most important. You have to really go with the flow for them. So just understanding how that works. And I know you've had um, some thoughts on that with some of the work that, a lot of people are thinking, well, I can't do that because then I'm lying to them. When they're saying, well, when's my husband coming home? And their husband's actually deceased or what have you. And
well,
then,
my response to that usually isn't that it's lying. It's me. I mean, it can feel that way, and I know it's really hard. But what it is it's actually meeting the person where they're at, especially when it comes to dementia and Alzheimer's, because it can almost be more distressing when you're saying, "Oh, yeah, your husband's not coming because they died 10 years ago. Don't you remember?" And it's like, well, no, they don't. That's why they asked. Like, that's why they asked about their husband because they don't remember where they're at mentally is in a space where their husband was home. And maybe if it's a husband and wife, right? Maybe the wife is used to cooking him dinner every night at 5 o'clock. And so it's 5 o'clock in the nursing home, and internally she knows it's 5 o'clock. So she's trying to figure out, well, why isn't my husband here? We're supposed to be eating together because we ate dinner together every day at 5 o'clock for.
yeah. So a lot of
So
times redirecting them,
yeah,
well, what were you planning to do with them right now? And figuring out that it's about the meal or what have you. Um, because when you then emphasize, well, don't you remember he died, then they're doing that. They're reliving that and re-grieving it.
well, it's not necessarily about lying of, well, if he's of course not coming, he's busy, he's at work or something. It's like just saying something simple of like, oh, what was your husband's name? Tell me about him. What did he like to do? And so then they start talking about the past. As you said, it's redirecting and validating the fact that they have these feelings and these emotions and they're trying to connect with something.
Yeah. And with that, when that's all happening, it's very stressful. And so that's kind of our fifth tip, really, because we had five tips. And the first ones are on that self-care and seeking other support, staying organized, educating yourself. But the last tip is just really on stress relief techniques and being able to step back and do some mindfulness or meditation practices or breathing and exercising, maybe some yoga or whatever the exercising, like you mentioned before, taking a walk, or, some people like running. That's not one that I would do. I don't like that. But other people, going to the gym or exercising, or maybe just even reading a book, like you said, and those kind of things, engaging in some type of relaxing activity, whether it could be reading or listening to music, um, watching a program on TV, just getting that step back to relax. And big thing is breathe. I think it's a big part of that. And, so just looking at them is just really prioritizing your self-care, seeking the support of all your networks, staying organized, really maybe getting a journal, getting a calendar journal, writing those out, writing those medications out, really understanding what their conditions are, what's happening, and what caregiver skills that you can do to help that person. If it's dementia, there's certain skills. If it's, all kinds of different disorders, certain skills are more helpful. And it's important to learn those skills as well, because you don't want to injure yourself. So just learning those appropriate skills so that you're not injured and then you're not able to help the person. It's really a lot. And then the last one of, practicing stress relief. But I was just thinking with any of that, um, we're trying to give, we're trying to caregive, we're trying to do all these things. But it kind of goes back to just that simple lesson that we hear every time we get on an airplane. If the oxygen comes down, help you got to put the mask on yourself first and then help the person, because you just have to make sure that you're staying healthy so that you're able to help that person. And I just have seen it so many times in the years that the caregiver, like, I've worked with people, and you have the person that's not healthy, but then the healthy spouse ends up, you know, just in worse shape because they haven't been caring for themselves at all. So I just want to encourage everybody to prioritize their well-being, and to reach out if they're needing to reach out to someone. And um, we're always here at Aging Advantage. You can post any other questions or comments on our Facebook Live. We'll kind of give you further information, or if you just have anything about this presentation, things that you've tried for yourself for stress or organization or any of these techniques, we're always able to comment on those as well.
Well, and before we just go, I wanted to say sometimes as we were giving some examples and we talked about in the heat of the moment, we might be getting really, really stressed and we don't really know what to do. No matter the situation, sometimes it just takes a minute to stop and breathe. Like just that calming technique where you just breathe for a couple of seconds before you move on. Especially because it does get stressful when you're trying to, say you're trying to help somebody eat lunch and the medicines are getting too confusing and you're getting frustrated, and instead of getting more frustrated, just take that time to breathe for a second. And I think that can just make all the world of difference when you're
Right, right.
taking that second, because then you're not getting more frustrated.
Yeah. And I think that's any time in life, a lot of times, even with that caregiving, um, you got a lot of things going on in your head. Recently we went and saw the Inside Out movie. There's a lot of things going on in your head, a lot of different emotions, and taking the time to take a breath and think about it and think about that appropriate response. But well, thank you all for joining us today. This was a little bit shorter presentation than some of ours, but we just wanted to give these very distinct 5 tips, 5 caregiving
Cool.
tips
Why don't you repeat the 5 specific tips you gave? That way
that
we can.
I'll say them again. Prioritizing self-care, seeking support, staying organized, educating yourself on your person's condition and the things that go with that, and practicing stress relief techniques, whether that could be mindfulness or breathing or different relaxation. So those are the 5 tips. And maybe we can like write them in the chat, the comments later on Facebook. So thanks again, and watch out. We usually do 1 or 2 caregiver talks every month, and we're doing other topics as that are just related to things that will help you that are not necessarily specific to caregivers. So keep watching our page, and you'll stay informed. Thank you so much.